Welcome to what might be the most transformative few minutes of your life. I know that sounds bold, especially when you're about to spend the next 2 hours with me. But here's the thing. Communication isn't just about talking. It's about unlocking every door in your life. Your relationships, your career, your confidence, your ability to influence and inspire others. It all comes down to how well you can connect with another human being through words, energy, and understanding. Right now, you might be thinking you're pretty good at communication already. Most people do. But here's what I've discovered. After studying thousands of interactions, the difference between good communicators and truly exceptional ones isn't talent. It's understanding the hidden psychology behind human connection. And that's exactly what we're going to master together today. By the time we're done, you'll have the tools to walk into any room, any conversation, any challenging situation, and not just survive, but thrive. You'll understand why some people naturally draw others in while others struggle to be heard. You'll know how to read people like an open book, how to make anyone feel truly understood, and how to express yourself in ways that create genuine influence and lasting impact. So whether you're here to improve your personal relationships, advance your career, or simply become more confident in social situations, you're in exactly the right place. Let's begin this journey together. Chapter 1. The foundation of communication. Most people think communication is about being a good talker. But that's like saying cooking is just about turning on the stove. Real communication is a complex dance between minds, emotions, and intentions. It's the bridge between your inner world and everyone else's. And when that bridge is strong, magic happens. Let me start with something that might surprise you. Communication is actually more about what you don't say than what you do say. Research shows that only 7% of communication comes from your actual words. 38% comes from your tone of voice, and 55% comes from your body language. Think about that for a moment. If you're only focusing on finding the right words, you're missing 93% of the conversation. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Effective communication isn't just about transmitting information from your brain to someone else's. It's about creating a shared emotional experience. When you truly communicate well, you're not just exchanging data, you're synchronizing with another human being on multiple levels simultaneously. This is why some people can say very little but leave you feeling completely understood and energized, while others can talk for hours and leave you feeling drained and disconnected. The difference isn't in the quantity of words or even the intelligence behind them. It's in their ability to create what psychologists call interpersonal resonance, a state where two minds naturally sync up and find harmony. Think about the best conversations you've ever had. Maybe it was with a close friend who just got you, or perhaps a stranger you met who somehow made you feel immediately comfortable. In those moments, something special was happening beneath the surface. Your nervous systems were actually synchronizing. Your breathing patterns were matching, and your brain waves were beginning to align. This isn't mystical thinking. It's measurable neuroscience. When this synchronization happens, several powerful things occur. First, trust builds rapidly. Your subconscious mind recognizes the other person as safe and familiar, even if you just met them. Second, creativity and problem-solving abilities increase dramatically. When minds sync up, they become more than the sum of their parts, generating insights and solutions neither could reach alone. Third, memory formation improves. You remember synchronized conversations more vividly and for longer periods because your brain was in an optimal learning state. But here's the challenge. Most of us have never been taught how to create this synchronization intentionally. We've been taught to focus on what we want to say, not on how to create the conditions for genuine connection. We've been trained to argue our points, not to understand other perspectives. We've learned to wait for our turn to talk, not to truly listen. This is exactly why so many conversations feel forced, why so many relationships struggle with miscommunication, and why so many talented people fail to advance in their careers despite having great ideas. They're missing the fundamental understanding of what communication really is and how it actually works. The foundation of all great communication rests on three pillars. First is presence, the ability to be fully engaged in the moment with another person, not thinking about what you'll say next or checking your mental to-do list. Second is empathy, the capacity to step into someone else's emotional world and see things from their perspective. Third is authenticity, the courage to be genuinely yourself while remaining sensitive to others' needs and feelings. When these three elements combine, something remarkable happens. You stop trying to impress people and start connecting with them. You stop performing and start relating. You stop pushing your agenda and start creating shared understanding. And paradoxically, when you stop trying to be impressive, you become far more influential than you ever imagined possible. This is the foundation we're building everything else on. Not tricks or manipulation techniques, but a genuine understanding of how human beings connect and how you can become the kind of person others naturally want to listen to, trust, and follow. Chapter 2. Understanding the psychology of connection. Human beings are wired for connection from the moment we're born. It's not a luxury or a nice-to-have. It's a biological necessity, as fundamental as food or shelter. Understanding this psychology is the key to transforming how you communicate and how others respond to you. When you understand what's happening in people's brains during conversations, everything changes. Suddenly, you're not just throwing words into the air and hoping they stick. You're strategically creating the conditions for genuine understanding and connection. Every person you meet is carrying an invisible burden. The fundamental human need to feel understood, valued, and accepted. This isn't weakness. It's universal human psychology. Even the most confident, successful people you know have this same deep need. The difference is that some people have learned to meet this need in healthy ways, while others are still searching desperately for someone who truly gets them. When you communicate with someone, you're either feeding this need or starving it. There's really no neutral ground. Every interaction either makes people feel more understood or more isolated, more valued or more dismissed, more accepted or more judged. And here's the crucial part. People will always remember how you made them feel, long after they've forgotten what you actually said. This is why technical expertise alone doesn't make someone a great leader or partner or friend. You can have all the right answers, but if you make people feel stupid or unimportant while you're sharing them, your knowledge becomes worthless. On the other hand, when you make people feel intelligent, capable, and valued, they'll listen to you even when you're wrong, because they trust that you care about their well-being. The human brain is constantly asking three subconscious questions in every interaction. First, am I safe with this person? This happens within milliseconds and determines whether someone's defenses go up or down. Second, do they respect me? This influences whether people feel comfortable sharing their real thoughts or feel they need to perform and hide. Third, will they help me or use me? This determines whether someone sees you as an ally or a threat to their interests. Most people have no idea their brain is asking these questions, but the answers determine everything about how the conversation unfolds. When someone's subconscious answers yes to all three, you get access to their best thinking, their creativity, their enthusiasm, and their genuine collaboration. When they answer no to even one of these questions, you're dealing with their defensive, protective self, and no meaningful communication can happen. This is why the most successful communicators focus first on making people feel safe, respected, and supported, before they worry about getting their own points across. They understand that influence is a byproduct of trust, not a substitute for it. But there's another layer to this psychology that most people miss entirely. Every person you communicate with is operating from their own unique emotional state, shaped by their experiences that day, their current stresses, their past relationships, and their future concerns. They're not a blank slate waiting for your message. They're a complex emotional ecosystem that your words will either harmonize with or disrupt. Skilled communicators learn to read these emotional states quickly and adjust their approach accordingly. If someone is stressed, they know to be calmer and more reassuring. If someone is excited, they match that energy appropriately. If someone is skeptical, they lead with understanding rather than arguments. They recognize that the same words can have completely different impacts depending on the emotional context they land in. This emotional awareness extends to understanding different personality types and communication styles. Some people process information quickly and want bottom-line conclusions. Others need time to think through details and implications. Some people are motivated by logic and facts. Others are driven by relationships and feelings. Some prefer direct, frank conversations. Others need more gentleness and diplomacy. There's no right or wrong style, but there are compatible and incompatible combinations. When you learn to recognize these differences and adapt your approach, you can connect effectively with virtually anyone. When you insist on communicating only in your preferred style, you'll struggle with anyone who's different from you. The most sophisticated communicators also understand the power of emotional contagion. Emotions are literally contagious between humans. Mirror neurons in our brains automatically mimic the emotions we observe in others. This means that your emotional state directly influences everyone around you, whether you realize it or not. If you're anxious, you make others anxious. If you're confident, you help others feel more confident. If you're genuinely curious about others, you make them feel more interesting and important. If you're defensive, you trigger defensiveness in return. This isn't about manipulation. It's about taking responsibility for the emotional atmosphere you create wherever you go. Understanding emotional contagion also means recognizing when you're being infected by someone else's emotional state. If you walk into a room where someone is angry and you suddenly feel agitated, that's emotional contagion at work. Skilled communicators learn to maintain their own emotional center while remaining empathetic to others. so they can be helpful rather than reactive. Another crucial aspect of connection psychology is understanding the role of stories in human communication. Our brains are story processing machines. We don't just exchange facts and opinions. We share narratives that give meaning to our experiences. When you learn to communicate in stories rather than abstract concepts, you bypass people's analytical defenses and speak directly to their imagination and emotions. But here's what most people don't realize. Every person is living inside their own story about who they are, what's possible for them, and how the world works. When you communicate in a way that validates and enhances their positive story about themselves, they'll be drawn to you. When your communication threatens or diminishes their story, they'll resist everything you say, no matter how logical or helpful it might be. This is why the most influential communicators are skilled at helping people become the heroes of their own stories. Rather than trying to be the hero themselves, they ask questions that help people discover their own insights. They offer support that empowers rather than creates dependence. They celebrate others' successes and help them see their own potential more clearly. Chapter 3. Mastering Self. Awareness in Communication. Self-awareness is the cornerstone of exceptional communication. Yet, it's the most overlooked skill in our society. Most people spend so much time thinking about what they want to say that they never develop awareness of how they're actually coming across. This gap between intention and impact destroys more relationships and opportunities than any other factor. True self-awareness in communication means understanding your triggers, your patterns, your strengths, and your blind spots. It means recognizing how your mood affects your ability to listen. It means noticing when your ego is driving the conversation instead of your desire to understand. It means being honest about when you're trying to be right instead of trying to be helpful. Let's start with emotional triggers, because these are the invisible landmines that blow up potentially great conversations. Everyone has certain topics, tones, or behaviors that instantly activate their defensive systems. Maybe it's when someone questions your competence, or when they seem dismissive, or when they interrupt you. The moment you get triggered, your intelligent, thoughtful self goes offline, and your reactive, protective self takes over. The problem is that most people don't realize they're triggered until after they've already said something they regret. By then, the damage is done, and they're stuck trying to repair a conversation instead of enjoying a productive one. Self-aware communicators develop the ability to notice their triggers in real time before they react. They feel the emotional charge building and make a conscious choice about how to respond. This requires developing what psychologists call metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking. In conversations, this means maintaining a part of your awareness that observes what's happening both in your mind and in the interaction itself. You're simultaneously engaged in the conversation and monitoring the quality of that engagement. When you develop this skill, you start noticing patterns you never saw before. Maybe you realize you tend to interrupt when you're excited about an idea. Perhaps you discover that you shut down when someone raises their voice slightly. You might notice that you become argumentative when you feel unheard, or that you get overly agreeable when you want to be liked. These patterns aren't character flaws. They're simply unconscious habits that were once protective but may no longer serve you. Once you can see them clearly, you can start making different choices. Instead of automatically reacting, You create space between stimulus and response, and in that space lies your power to communicate consciously rather than reactively. Self-awareness also means understanding your communication strengths and learning to leverage them effectively. Maybe you're naturally good at making people feel comfortable, or you have a gift for explaining complex ideas simply, or you're skilled at asking questions that help people think more clearly. When you know your strengths, you can use them strategically to serve others and advance your goals. But equally important is awareness of your communication weaknesses. Not to judge yourself, but to compensate for them consciously. If you tend to be too direct and sometimes hurt people's feelings, you can learn to add more warmth to your delivery. If you're naturally gentle but sometimes fail to be clear about important issues, you can practice being more assertive when necessary. One of the most powerful aspects of self-awareness is learning to recognize your internal state and how it affects your communication. When you're tired, stressed, frustrated, or distracted, your communication abilities diminish significantly. You become less patient, less creative, less empathetic, and more likely to misread situations or react poorly. Self-aware communicators develop strategies for managing their internal state before important conversations. They might take a few deep breaths to center themselves, or do a quick mental scan to identify any emotions that might interfere with their ability to listen well. They recognize when they're not in a good state for difficult conversations and postpone them when possible, or at least acknowledge their limitations openly. This kind of self-honesty is incredibly disarming and effective. When you can say something like, "I realize I'm feeling a bit defensive right now, so I want to make sure I'm really hearing what you're saying," you immediately create safety and trust. People respect vulnerability and authenticity far more than they respect perfection. Self-awareness also extends to understanding your unconscious biases and assumptions. Everyone has mental shortcuts and prejudices that influence how they interpret what others say and do. Maybe you assume that quiet people are unfriendly, or that confident people are arrogant, or that emotional people are unstable. These assumptions color every interaction and often create misunderstandings. The goal isn't to eliminate all biases. That's impossible. The goal is to hold them lightly, to remain curious about whether your first impressions are accurate, and to be willing to revise your opinions when you get new information. Self-aware communicators approach each conversation with what Zen practitioners call beginner's mind, a willingness to see people and situations fresh, without the burden of too many preconceptions. Perhaps most importantly, self-awareness in communication means taking responsibility for your impact on others, even when that wasn't your intention. It means being willing to ask for feedback about how you come across and being open to making adjustments when necessary. It means apologizing genuinely when you've hurt or confused someone, regardless of whether that was your goal. This level of self-awareness transforms you from someone who just talks to someone who truly communicates. It makes you the kind of person others seek out when they need to be heard, understood, or guided through difficult situations. And paradoxically, the more aware you become of your own limitations and imperfections, the more powerful your ability to connect with others becomes. Another crucial dimension of self-awareness is understanding your own communication style and how it affects different types of people. Some communicators are naturally direct and task-focused, while others are more relationship-oriented and diplomatic. Some prefer lots of detail and context, while others want quick, high-level summaries. Some are comfortable with conflict and debate, while others avoid confrontation at all costs. None of these styles is inherently better or worse, but each creates different responses in different people. When you understand your natural style, you can make conscious choices about when to leverage it and when to adapt. If you're naturally direct, you might choose to be more gentle with sensitive personalities. If you're naturally diplomatic, you might push yourself to be more assertive when clarity is crucial. Self-awareness also involves recognizing your own needs in communication and learning to meet them appropriately. Maybe you need time to process before responding to important questions. Perhaps you need to feel heard before you can fully listen to others. You might need encouragement and validation, or you might prefer straight feedback without sugarcoating. When you understand and acknowledge your own needs, you can communicate them clearly to others, instead of hoping they'll magically figure out what you need. This prevents a lot of unnecessary frustration and misunderstanding. It also models healthy communication for others, giving them permission to express their needs as well. Chapter 4. The Power of Active Listening. If communication were a sport, listening would be the most important skill. Yet it's the one most people practice the least. True listening is not waiting for your turn to talk. It's not looking for holes in someone's argument. It's not mentally preparing your response while they're speaking. Real listening is a full-contact sport that requires every part of your being, your mind, your heart, your intuition, and your complete presence. The difference between hearing and listening is like the difference between looking and seeing. Anyone with functioning ears can hear sounds, but listening is an active choice that creates transformation in both the speaker and the listener. When you truly listen to someone, you don't just receive information, you receive the person themselves. Most people have rarely experienced being truly listened to in their entire lives. Think about that for a moment. Despite being surrounded by people who hear them speak, most individuals have seldom felt the profound experience of having another human being give them their complete, undivided, non-judgmental attention. This is why exceptional listeners wield such extraordinary influence, and why people feel so drawn to them. Active listening begins with the recognition that the goal is understanding, not agreement. You don't have to agree with someone to listen to them fully. In fact, some of the most powerful conversations happen when people strongly disagree but maintain deep respect for each other's humanity and perspective. When you approach listening with curiosity rather than judgment, you create space for genuine dialogue instead of competing monologues. The first level of active listening is paying attention to the words themselves, not just the surface meaning, but the emotional content underneath. People rarely say exactly what they mean on the first try. They circle around their real concerns. They use safe language to test whether you're trustworthy, and they often express their deepest fears through seemingly casual comments. Skilled listeners learn to hear the emotions behind the words. When someone says, "I'm fine," in a tight voice, they hear the frustration or hurt. When someone uses absolute language like always or never, they recognize the emotional overwhelm that's distorting perspective. When someone speaks very quickly or very slowly, they notice the underlying anxiety or careful consideration. But words are only the beginning. The second level of active listening involves paying attention to everything that's not being said. The pauses, the hesitations, the topics that get avoided, the energy shifts that happen when certain subjects arise. Sometimes the most important communication happens in the silence between words. The third level is listening to the whole person, their posture, their breathing, their facial expressions, their gestures. Human beings communicate with their entire being. And when you expand your listening to include all of these channels, you start picking up information that others completely miss. The fourth and most sophisticated level of listening is what we might call listening for possibility. This means hearing not just what someone is saying about their current situation, but what they're longing for, what they're afraid of, what they're moving toward or away from. You listen for their values, their dreams, their unspoken needs, and their highest potential. When you listen at this level, you can often hear things that people don't even realize they're communicating. You might notice that someone who's complaining about their job is really expressing a desire for more creativity or autonomy. Someone who seems angry might actually be feeling scared or overwhelmed. Someone who appears confident might be revealing subtle signs of self-doubt. This kind of deep listening requires tremendous presence and practice. Your mind naturally wants to wander, to plan responses, to make judgments, to relate everything back to your own experience. Learning to quiet this mental chatter and focus completely on another person is like developing a new sense organ. One of the most powerful tools in active listening is the use of reflective responses. Instead of jumping immediately to advice or opinions, you first demonstrate that you've truly understood by reflecting back what you've heard, both the content and the emotion. This serves two crucial purposes. It shows the speaker that you're really paying attention, and it gives them a chance to correct any misunderstandings before the conversation goes further. Reflective listening might sound like, "It sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed by all the demands on your time, and you're wondering if there's a way to create more balance without letting people down." Or, "I'm hearing that this decision is really important to you, and you want to make sure you consider all the implications before moving forward." This kind of response is profoundly validating because it demonstrates that you're not just hearing words, you're understanding the person's experience. Most people are so hungry for this kind of validation that they'll open up significantly when they feel truly heard. Another crucial aspect of active listening is learning to ask questions that deepen understanding rather than satisfy curiosity. The best questions invite people to explore their own thoughts and feelings more deeply, rather than putting them on the defensive or steering the conversation toward your interests. Instead of, "Why did you do that?" which can sound judgmental. Try, "What was most important to you when you made that decision?" Instead of, "Don't you think you should?" which is really a disguised suggestion. Try, "What options are you considering?" Or, "What would ideal look like for you?" The most transformative aspect of active listening is that it changes you as much as it serves the other person. When you really listen to people's stories, struggles, and dreams, you develop a deeper understanding of human nature. You become less judgmental, more compassionate, and more skilled at seeing situations from multiple perspectives. This expanded perspective makes you a better problem solver, a more effective leader, and a more trusted friend or colleague. People start seeking you out not because you have all the answers, but because you help them find their own answers by creating the space for them to think clearly. But active listening also requires understanding when not to listen, or rather, when to redirect the conversation toward more productive territory. Sometimes people get stuck in negative spirals, repeating the same complaints without moving toward solutions. Skilled listeners know how to acknowledge the emotion while gently guiding toward more constructive dialogue. They might say something like, "I can hear how frustrated you are with this situation. You've tried several approaches already. What would need to change for you to feel like you're making progress?" This validates the person's feelings while opening up new possibilities for forward movement. Active listening also means being aware of your own listening limitations and boundaries. You can't be fully present for everyone all the time, and attempting to do so will leave you emotionally drained and less effective overall. Self-aware listeners learn to recognize when they don't have the emotional bandwidth for deep listening and communicate this honestly rather than pretending to listen while being mentally absent. Chapter 5. Reading non-verbal signals. Like a pro. While people can control their words to some degree, their bodies tell the truth. Non-verbal communication is the hidden language that reveals what people really think, feel, and intend. Mastering this silent language gives you an almost supernatural ability to understand others and respond appropriately to their unspoken needs and concerns. The challenge is that most people think they're good at reading body language because they notice obvious signals. Crossed arms might mean defensiveness, or a smile indicates happiness. But this surface-level understanding often leads to misinterpretation because the same gesture can mean entirely different things depending on context, culture, and individual personality patterns. True mastery of non-verbal communication requires understanding that it's not about isolated gestures, but about clusters of signals that create a coherent story. It's also about recognizing baseline behavior for each individual and noticing deviations from that norm, rather than applying universal interpretations to everyone. Let's start with facial expressions, which are often considered the most revealing non-verbal channel. While basic emotions like happiness, sadness, anger, fear, surprise, and disgust have fairly universal expressions, the subtle variations and micro-expressions that flash across people's faces for fractions of a second contain much richer information. A genuine smile, for example, involves not just the mouth but the entire face, particularly the muscles around the eyes that create crow's feet. A forced or polite smile typically only engages the lower facial muscles, leaving the eyes unchanged. When you learn to notice this difference, you can immediately tell whether someone is genuinely pleased to see you or just being socially appropriate. But even more valuable than reading emotions is learning to spot incongruence between what someone is saying and what their face is revealing. When words and facial expressions don't match, the face is almost always telling the truth. Someone might say they're excited about a proposal, while their face shows concern or skepticism. Someone might claim they understand your explanation while their expression reveals confusion. Eye contact patterns provide another rich source of information about what's happening in someone's mind. While cultural norms around eye contact vary significantly, changes in someone's typical pattern are usually meaningful. Someone who normally makes good eye contact but suddenly starts looking away might be feeling uncomfortable with the topic. Someone who's usually more reserved but begins making intense eye contact might be trying to emphasize their sincerity. The direction of eye movements can also be revealing. When people are remembering visual information, they tend to look up and to their left. When they're constructing visual images, they typically look up and to their right. When accessing auditory memories, they might look to the left, and when creating sounds, they often look to the right. While these patterns aren't universal and shouldn't be used to detect deception, they can provide clues about how someone is processing information. Posture and body positioning reveal attitudes and comfort levels that people might not express verbally. Someone who's genuinely interested in what you're saying typically leans slightly forward. People who are feeling defensive or skeptical often lean back or create barriers with their arms or objects. Open postures with uncrossed arms and legs generally indicate receptiveness, while closed postures suggest resistance or discomfort. But context is crucial in interpreting these signals. Someone might cross their arms because they're cold, not because they're defensive. Someone might lean back because they're relaxed and comfortable, not because they're disengaging. This is why it's essential to look for clusters of signals and to consider the environment and situation. Gestures add another layer of meaning to verbal communication. Some people are naturally expressive with their hands, while others are more reserved. What matters is noticing changes from someone's baseline behavior. Someone who typically gestures freely but suddenly becomes still might be feeling uncertain or cautious. Someone who's usually more contained but starts making expansive gestures might be becoming more passionate or emotional. The timing and synchronization of gestures with speech also provides information. When someone's gestures lag behind their words or seem disconnected from what they're saying, it might indicate that they're being less than completely authentic, or that they're struggling to express something complex. Voice tone and vocal patterns carry enormous amounts of emotional information. The same words can convey completely different meanings depending on pace, pitch, volume, and inflection. A slight change in vocal tone can transform a question from curious inquiry to skeptical challenge. Learning to hear these subtle variations helps you respond to what people really mean, not just what they literally say. Changes in breathing patterns often indicate shifts in emotional state. Shallow, rapid breathing might suggest anxiety or excitement. Deep, slow breathing typically indicates calm or deliberate thinking. Holding breath or sighing can reveal frustration, overwhelm, or relief. Physical distance and spatial positioning also communicate important information about comfort levels and relationship dynamics. People naturally move closer to those they trust and like, and maintain greater distance from those they're uncertain about. Someone who steps back during a conversation might need more space to feel comfortable, while someone who moves closer might be seeking greater connection. The key to using this knowledge ethically and effectively is to remember that non-verbal signals are information, not absolute truth. They provide clues about what might be happening for someone, but they require verification through respectful inquiry. When you notice incongruence or discomfort, the appropriate response is often to slow down, check in with the person, or adjust your approach to help them feel more at ease. The most sophisticated use of non-verbal awareness involves calibrating your own signals to create the emotional atmosphere you want. When you're conscious of how your posture, gestures, facial expressions, and tone affect others, You can deliberately create feelings of safety, confidence, enthusiasm, or calm. This isn't manipulation. It's taking responsibility for the impact you have on others and using that awareness to serve their highest good as well as your own. Understanding non-verbal communication also means recognizing cultural differences and adapting accordingly. Eye contact norms, personal space preferences, gesture meanings, and touch boundaries vary significantly across cultures. What seems respectful in one culture might appear rude or invasive in another. Skilled communicators develop cultural sensitivity and adjust their non-verbal behavior appropriately. Finally, reading non-verbal signals effectively requires practice and patience. Like any skill, it improves with conscious attention and experience. Start by observing one channel at a time. Maybe focus on facial expressions for a week. Then add vocal patterns. Then include posture and gestures. Over time, you'll develop an intuitive sense for the overall story someone's body is telling, and you'll be able to respond with greater empathy and effectiveness. Chapter 6. Building rapport and trust. Rapport is the invisible bridge that connects two people at a subconscious level. When genuine rapport exists, communication flows effortlessly, misunderstandings decrease dramatically, and influence increases exponentially. But here's what most people don't understand. Rapport isn't something that just happens to you. It's a skill you can develop and deploy intentionally in any interaction. The foundation of rapport lies in something called unconscious matching. When people feel connected to each other, they naturally begin to mirror each other's posture, breathing, speech patterns, and energy levels. You've probably noticed this phenomenon without realizing it. How couples who've been together for years start to sound alike, or how friends unconsciously copy each other's gestures during animated conversations. But skilled communicators don't wait for this natural mirroring to happen. They create rapport intentionally by subtly matching and mirroring others, while remaining completely authentic. This isn't about copying someone's obvious way that makes them uncomfortable. It's about finding the rhythm and tone that helps the other person feel most at ease. Start with matching their overall energy level. If someone speaks quietly and moves deliberately, don't overwhelm them with high energy and rapid speech. If someone is naturally enthusiastic and expressive, don't respond with monotone restraint. This doesn't mean becoming someone you're not. It means finding the version of yourself that resonates best with the person you're talking to. You can also match speech patterns subtly. If someone speaks slowly and chooses their words carefully, give them time and space to express themselves fully. If someone speaks quickly and jumps between topics, you can match that pace while still maintaining clarity. If someone uses visual language like, "I see what you mean," or "that looks right to me," you can incorporate similar visual metaphors into your responses. But the most powerful form of rapport building happens at the emotional level. When you can accurately identify and reflect someone's emotional state, they feel understood in a way that transcends words. This requires developing what emotional intelligence researchers call affective empathy, the ability to actually feel an echo of what someone else is experiencing. This doesn't mean taking on their emotions completely or losing your own emotional center. It means opening yourself up enough to sense their emotional reality and then responding in a way that acknowledges and validates that experience. When someone feels truly seen and understood at an emotional level, trust builds rapidly and defensiveness melts away. Trust, the deeper foundation beneath rapport, is built through consistency between your words and actions over time. But even in first-time interactions, you can establish initial trust through what psychologists call micro-demonstrations of trustworthiness. These are small actions that signal your reliability and genuine care for the other person's well-being. Micro-demonstrations might include remembering and referencing something important they mentioned earlier in the conversation, keeping confidences they share with you, following through on small commitments you make during your interaction, or prioritizing their needs over your own agenda when appropriate. One of the most powerful trust-building behaviors is admitting when you don't know something instead of pretending or making something up. Most people respect honesty and vulnerability far more than they respect false confidence. When you can say, "I don't know the answer to that, but I'd be happy to find out for you," you actually increase rather than decrease your credibility. Another crucial element of trust building is demonstrating genuine interest in the other person as an individual, not just as someone who can help you achieve your goals. This means asking questions about their experiences, opinions, and perspectives, and then really listening to their answers instead of just waiting for your turn to talk. People can sense when your interest in them is genuine versus when you're just being polite or trying to manipulate them. Authentic curiosity about others is one of the most attractive and trust-building qualities you can develop. It makes people feel valued and important, which satisfies one of their deepest psychological needs. The physical environment also plays a role in building rapport and trust. When possible, create conditions that help people feel comfortable and at ease. This might mean choosing a quiet location for important conversations, sitting at angles rather than directly across from each other, which can feel confrontational, or ensuring that both parties have equal status in terms of seating and positioning. Your body language should signal openness and receptiveness. Uncrossed arms, relaxed posture, appropriate eye contact, and genuine facial expressions all contribute to an atmosphere of safety and trust. But remember that the most important element is authenticity. People can sense when you're performing versus when you're being genuine. Building rapport and trust also requires understanding and respecting boundaries. Pay attention to cues that someone might be feeling overwhelmed, pressured, or uncomfortable, and adjust your approach accordingly. Pushing too hard or too fast can destroy rapport even when your intentions are good. Different personalities require different approaches to rapport building. Some people warm up quickly and appreciate friendly conversation and personal sharing. Others prefer to establish competence and credibility before they're willing to trust. Some value directness and efficiency, while others need time to build comfort gradually. The key is developing sensitivity to these different styles and adapting your approach while remaining true to yourself. You're not trying to become a different person. You're finding the most appropriate expression of who you are for each unique interaction. Trust and rapport are also maintained through consistent follow-through over time. If you say you'll call someone back, call them back. If you promise to send information, send it promptly. If you commit to meeting a deadline, meet it. These small consistencies build a foundation of reliability that supports all future interactions. But perhaps the most important aspect of building lasting trust is demonstrating that you have the other person's best interests at heart, not just your own. This means being willing to recommend a solution that doesn't benefit you if it's truly the best option for them. It means giving credit generously and taking responsibility for mistakes. It means being honest about potential downsides or risks, not just highlighting benefits. When people believe that you genuinely care about their well-being and success, they'll trust you with their real concerns, their honest feedback, and their authentic collaboration. This level of trust transforms ordinary interactions into extraordinary partnerships and creates the foundation for long-term relationship success. Chapter 7. Handling difficult conversations. Difficult conversations are an inevitable part of life. Yet most people avoid them until they become explosive crises or allow them to fester into permanent relationship damage. The ability to navigate challenging discussions skillfully is perhaps the most valuable communication skill you can develop because it determines whether conflicts become opportunities for deeper understanding or sources of lasting resentment. The first step in handling difficult conversations is reframing your mindset about conflict itself. Most people see disagreement and tension as problems to be avoided or battles to be won. But skilled communicators understand that difficult conversations are actually opportunities to strengthen relationships, clarify misunderstandings, and find solutions that work for everyone involved. This shift in perspective changes everything about how you approach challenging discussions. Instead of entering with dread and defensiveness, you enter with curiosity and hope. Instead of trying to prove you're right, you focus on understanding what's really happening and finding a path forward that honors everyone's needs and concerns. Before initiating a difficult conversation, take time to clarify your own intentions and emotional state. Ask yourself, what outcome do I really want from this conversation? Am I seeking to understand, to solve a problem, to express my feelings, or to change someone's behavior? The clearer you are about your genuine goals, the more likely you are to achieve them. Also, examine your emotional state honestly. If you're angry, hurt, or frustrated, you may need to process those emotions first before you can have a productive conversation. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings, but rather ensuring that you can express them constructively rather than reactively. When you do initiate the conversation, start with what communication experts call establishing safety. This means making it clear that your goal is mutual understanding and problem-solving, not blame or punishment. You might say something like, "I care about our relationship, and I think there's something we need to talk through. I'm hoping we can understand each other better and find a way forward that works for both of us." Use I statements to express your experience rather than you. Statements that can sound accusatory. Instead of, "You always interrupt me," try, "I've noticed that I sometimes feel unheard in our conversations, and I'd like to find a better way for us to communicate." This approach focuses on your experience rather than attacking the other person's character. Listen for the emotion and need behind the other person's words, not just their literal statements. When people are upset, they often say things they don't really mean, or express their concerns in ways that sound more aggressive than they intend. If someone says, "You never help around here," they might really be saying, "I'm feeling overwhelmed and unsupported, and I need more partnership from you." Acknowledge and validate emotions. before addressing the content of the disagreement. You might say, "I can see that you're really frustrated about this, and I understand why that would be upsetting." This doesn't mean you agree with their interpretation of events, but it shows that you recognize their emotional experience as valid. Ask clarifying questions to make sure you understand the real issue. Often, what people initially complain about isn't actually the core problem. Someone might criticize your work style when they're really concerned about meeting deadlines, or object to your social plans when they're actually feeling neglected in the relationship. Questions like, "What's most important to you about this?" Or, "What would need to change for you to feel better about this situation?" can help uncover the underlying needs and concerns that drive the surface-level conflict. When emotions run high, use what psychologists call emotional labeling to help diffuse intensity. Simply naming the emotions present in the conversation can help calm them. You might say, "It sounds like you're feeling angry about what happened, and I'm noticing that I'm feeling defensive. Can we take a breath and try to understand each other?" If the conversation becomes too heated or unproductive, don't be afraid to pause and regroup. You might say, "I can see we're both getting triggered right now, and I don't think we're thinking as clearly as we could be. Can we take a short break and come back to this when we're both feeling calmer?" Look for areas of agreement and common ground, even in the midst of disagreement. You might not agree on the solution, but you probably agree on the importance of the relationship or the goal of finding a resolution. Highlighting these shared values can help shift the conversation from adversarial to collaborative. When presenting your own perspective, be honest about your contributions to the problem. Taking appropriate responsibility demonstrates maturity and makes it easier for the other person to acknowledge their part as well. You might say, "I realize I could have communicated more clearly about my expectations, and I think that contributed to the confusion." Focus on future solutions rather than past blame. Once you've acknowledged what went wrong, shift the conversation toward, "How can we handle this differently going forward?" This forward-looking approach is more productive than endlessly rehashing past mistakes. Be willing to apologize genuinely when you've made mistakes, but make sure your apologies are specific and include changed behavior. A good apology acknowledges what you did wrong, expresses remorse for the impact, and commits to specific changes. "I'm sorry I was late to our meeting. I know that disrespected your time, and I will set earlier reminders to ensure I'm on time in the future." Sometimes difficult conversations reveal that people have fundamentally different values or needs that can't be easily reconciled. In these cases, the goal shifts from finding agreement to finding a way to coexist respectfully despite disagreement. You might need to agree to disagree while still maintaining the relationship. Remember that not every difficult conversation will end with a neat resolution. Sometimes the goal is simply to understand each other better, even if you don't reach agreement. Sometimes the conversation is just the beginning of a longer process of rebuilding trust or changing patterns. The most important thing is to maintain respect for the other person's humanity throughout the process, even when you strongly disagree with their actions or perspectives. People can sense when you see them as fundamentally good but misguided versus when you see them as fundamentally flawed or bad. This distinction determines whether difficult conversations strengthen or damage relationships long-term. Chapter 8. The Art of Persuasion and Influence. True persuasion is not manipulation or coercion. It's the art of helping others see possibilities they hadn't considered before. The most ethical and effective influence comes not from pushing your agenda onto others, but from understanding their needs so deeply that you can help them achieve their own goals in ways that also serve your purposes. The foundation of genuine influence is credibility. Before people will be influenced by you, they need to believe that you're competent, trustworthy, and have their best interests at heart. This credibility is built through everything we've discussed so far: authentic connection, active listening, emotional intelligence, and consistent follow-through. But credibility alone isn't enough. The most influential communicators understand that people are persuaded more by their own conclusions than by someone else's arguments. This means that instead of trying to convince people directly, you create conditions for them to convince themselves. This approach requires what influence experts call collaborative discovery. Instead of presenting your conclusion and then supporting it with evidence, you guide people through a thought process that helps them reach insights on their own. You ask questions that illuminate new possibilities, share relevant information that expands their perspective, and help them see connections they might have missed. For example, instead of saying, "You should invest in this training program," you might ask, "What skills do you think would be most valuable for your team's growth over the next year?" Then, "How are people currently developing those skills?" Followed by, "What would be possible if everyone had access to more structured development in those areas?" This approach helps them articulate their own need for the solution you're offering. Understanding different motivation styles is crucial for effective influence. Some people are motivated primarily by logic and facts. They want data, evidence, and rational analysis before making decisions. Others are driven more by emotions and relationships. They want to know how decisions will affect people and whether the people they trust support the idea. Some individuals are motivated by moving toward positive outcomes. They're energized by visions of success and achievement. Others are more motivated by moving away from problems. They're driven by the desire to avoid failure or negative consequences. The most effective influencers learn to recognize these different styles and adapt their approach accordingly. Visual communicators think in pictures and respond well to diagrams, metaphors, and imagery. Auditory communicators prefer discussions, explanations, and verbal processing. Kinesthetic communicators need to experience things physically and emotionally. They want to touch, feel, and try things out before committing. When you match your communication style to their processing preferences, your message lands with much greater impact. A visual person might be persuaded by seeing a clear diagram of how your proposal works. An auditory person might need to talk through all the implications before feeling comfortable. A kinesthetic person might need a trial period or pilot program. The timing of influence attempts is also crucial. People are most open to new ideas when they're experiencing some form of dissatisfaction with the status quo, when they have the mental and emotional bandwidth to consider change, and when they feel safe enough to take risks. Trying to influence someone who's overwhelmed, stressed, or perfectly content is usually ineffective. Social proof is one of the most powerful influence tools available. People are heavily influenced by what others like them are doing, especially others they respect or identify with. Instead of just presenting your idea, share stories about similar people who have successfully implemented similar approaches. But be authentic in your use of social proof. Don't manufacture false testimonials or exaggerate success stories. Genuine examples of relevant success carry far more weight than inflated claims. and dishonesty will eventually undermine all your influence. Reciprocity is another fundamental principle of influence. When you do something valuable for someone, they naturally feel inclined to return the favor. But the key is to give genuinely and without strings attached. When people sense that you're only being helpful in order to manipulate them later, the reciprocity backfires. Look for ways to provide value that truly serves the other person's interests, whether or not they ever choose to work with you or support your proposals. This might mean sharing useful information, making valuable introductions, or offering helpful feedback. When you give first and give generously, influence often follows naturally. Scarcity can also be a legitimate influence tool when used ethically. If there genuinely are limited opportunities, time frames, or resources available, sharing this information helps people make informed decisions. But artificial scarcity tactics, creating false urgency or fake limitations, are manipulative and ultimately damage your credibility. The most sophisticated influence happens at the level of identity and values. When you can help people see how your proposal aligns with who they are and what they care about most deeply, resistance dissolves naturally. This requires really understanding their core values, their self-concept, and their aspirations. You might say something like, "Given how much you value innovation and staying ahead of the curve, this approach might really appeal to you." Or, "I know how important family time is to you, so you might appreciate how this solution could save you several hours each week." Storytelling is perhaps the most powerful influence tool of all. Stories bypass analytical defenses and speak directly to imagination and emotion. When you share a relevant story about someone who faced a similar challenge and found success through the approach you're suggesting, people can envision themselves having a similar positive experience. But your stories must be true, relevant, and told in service of the listener's interests, not just to promote your agenda. The best influence stories help people see new possibilities for themselves, rather than just highlighting how great you or your solution is. Handle objections as valuable information rather than obstacles to overcome. When someone raises concerns, thank them for sharing their perspective and explore the objection thoroughly. Often, objections reveal important needs or fears that you can address directly. Ask questions like, "What would need to be true for this to feel right to you?" Or, "What's most important to you as you think about this decision?" This approach treats objections as opportunities for deeper understanding rather than battles to win. Finally, remember that the most ethical influence is always mutual. The best outcomes happen when both parties feel good about the result. If you find yourself using pressure, manipulation, or deception to get what you want, you're not practicing true influence, you're practicing coercion, and it will backfire eventually. True influence creates win-win outcomes where everyone feels heard, respected, and served. When you consistently operate from this principle, people will seek out your input and be naturally inclined to support your initiatives because they trust that your influence serves their best interests as well as your own. Chapter 9. Emotional Intelligence in Communication. Emotional intelligence is the invisible force that determines whether your communication creates connection or distance, whether it builds trust or breeds suspicion, and whether it inspires action or generates resistance. While technical communication skills are important, it's your emotional intelligence that transforms ordinary conversations into extraordinary experiences of understanding and collaboration. At its core, emotional intelligence in communication is about recognizing, understanding, and skillfully managing the emotions that arise in yourself and others during interactions. This isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It's about developing the awareness and skills to navigate emotional realities consciously and constructively. The first dimension of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Your ability to recognize your own emotions as they arise and understand how they affect your communication. Most people are so focused on the content of what they want to say that they completely miss the emotional undertones they're broadcasting. But these emotional undercurrents often communicate more powerfully than the words themselves. When you're feeling frustrated, anxious, excited, or uncertain, that emotional state colors everything you say and how you say it. People pick up on these emotional signals subconsciously and respond accordingly. If you're feeling defensive, others become defensive in return. If you're genuinely curious and open, others feel safe to share more authentically. Developing emotional self-awareness requires what researchers call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between different emotional states with precision. Instead of just knowing you feel good or bad, you learn to identify specific emotions, like contentment, enthusiasm, frustration, disappointment, or concern. This precision matters because different emotions require different responses. The approach that works well when you're mildly concerned won't be effective when you're deeply anxious. The communication style that serves you when you're excited might create problems when you're feeling overwhelmed. The second dimension is self-regulation. Your ability to manage your emotional responses consciously rather than being controlled by them. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally flat or inauthentic. It means developing the capacity to feel your emotions fully while choosing how to express them constructively. Self-regulation starts with creating space between stimulus and response. When something triggers an emotional reaction, instead of immediately speaking or acting from that emotional state, you pause long enough to choose your response consciously. This might mean taking a deep breath, counting to 10, or simply asking yourself, how do I want to handle this? Advanced emotional self-regulation involves learning to shift your emotional state intentionally when necessary. If you're feeling agitated but need to have a calm conversation, you can use techniques like deep breathing, visualization, or physical movement to shift into a more appropriate state. This isn't about being fake or manipulative. It's about being responsible for the emotional atmosphere you create. Just as you might choose different clothes for different occasions, you can learn to choose emotional states that serve the situation and the people involved. The third dimension is empathy, your ability to recognize and understand the emotions of others. This goes far beyond simply noticing obvious emotional displays. It involves picking up on subtle emotional cues, understanding the emotional context behind someone's words, and sensing the unspoken feelings that influence their behavior. Empathy requires what psychologists call theory of mind, the understanding that other people have different thoughts, feelings, and perspectives than you do. This seems obvious, but in practice, most people assume others think and feel similarly to themselves, which leads to constant misunderstandings and failed connections. True empathy means stepping into someone else's emotional shoes and seeing the world from their perspective, even when their experience is very different from your own. It means understanding that someone's emotional reaction might be perfectly reasonable given their history, their current stress levels, or their personal values, even if it seems disproportionate to you. Developing empathy requires curiosity about others' inner experiences and a willingness to ask questions that help you understand their perspective better. Instead of judging someone's emotional reaction, you explore it. Help me understand what this means to you, or what's making this feel so important, are questions that deepen empathy. The fourth dimension is social awareness. Your ability to read the emotional dynamics of groups and understand how emotions spread and influence collective behavior. Every group has an emotional climate that affects how people think, communicate, and make decisions. Some groups feel energized and optimistic, while others feel tense and defensive. Some teams feel psychologically safe to share ideas and concerns, while others feel like people need to watch their backs. As a communicator, you can both read these dynamics and influence them through your own emotional presence. Emotional contagion is real and powerful. When you enter a room feeling calm and confident, you influence everyone toward greater calm and confidence. When you bring anxiety or negativity, you spread those emotions as well. Skilled communicators take responsibility for their emotional impact and consciously choose to contribute positive emotional energy to their interactions. The fifth dimension is relationship management. Your ability to use emotional information to guide your interactions toward positive outcomes. This involves everything from knowing when to have sensitive conversations, to understanding how to motivate different personality types, to recognizing when someone needs support versus when they need space. Relationship management also involves conflict resolution skills, the ability to repair relationships after misunderstandings, and the capacity to build emotional bonds that survive stress and disagreement. It means knowing how to apologize effectively, how to express appreciation meaningfully, and how to navigate the complex emotional terrain of human relationships. One of the most important aspects of emotional intelligence in communication is learning to separate impact from intent. Just because someone's behavior affects you negatively doesn't mean they intended to hurt you. And just because you didn't intend to upset someone doesn't mean your impact wasn't real and important. Emotionally intelligent communicators take responsibility for their impact while also being willing to consider intent. They can say things like, "I don't think you meant to hurt me, but I felt dismissed when you interrupted me," or "I realize I came across as critical, even though I was trying to be helpful. Let me try expressing this differently." Emotional intelligence also involves understanding that emotions provide valuable information, not just obstacles to overcome. Anger often signals that someone's boundaries have been crossed. Anxiety might indicate that someone needs more information or reassurance. Sadness could mean that someone needs empathy and support. Instead of trying to eliminate emotions from communication, emotionally intelligent people learn to use emotional information to communicate more effectively. They recognize that addressing the emotional layer of communication often resolves the logical layer more quickly and completely. Finally, emotional intelligence in communication requires ongoing practice and development. It's not a skill you master once and then possess forever. It requires continuous attention to your own emotional patterns, ongoing curiosity about others' emotional experiences, and willingness to learn from both successful and unsuccessful interactions. The investment in developing emotional intelligence pays enormous dividends in every area of life. relationships become deeper and more satisfying. Conflicts resolve more quickly and completely. Influence increases naturally because people trust your emotional wisdom, and perhaps most importantly, you become the kind of person others seek out when they need understanding, support, or guidance through challenging situations. Chapter 10. Advanced Communication Techniques. Now that we've built a solid foundation of communication skills, let's explore some advanced techniques that can transform you into a truly exceptional communicator. These strategies require practice and finesse, but they can dramatically increase your ability to connect with others, navigate complex situations, and achieve outcomes that seemed impossible before. The first advanced technique is called meta-communication, the ability to communicate about the communication itself. This involves stepping outside the immediate content of a conversation to discuss the process, the relationship dynamics, or the communication patterns themselves. Meta-communication might sound like, "I notice we seem to be talking past each other. Can we pause and make sure we're on the same page?" Or, "It feels like there's some tension here that we're not addressing directly. Would it be helpful to talk about what's happening between us?" This technique is incredibly powerful because it allows you to address relationship issues and communication problems directly rather than letting them sabotage the conversation. Most people avoid meta-communication because it feels awkward or risky, but skilled communicators use it to create clarity and deepen connection. Another advanced technique is reframing, the ability to help others see situations from new perspectives that open up possibilities they hadn't considered. Reframing doesn't mean denying someone's experience or minimizing their concerns. It means helping them see additional layers of meaning or possibility. For example, if someone says, "This project is a complete disaster," you might reframe by saying, "It sounds like you're seeing some significant challenges that need attention. What if we looked at this as valuable information about what adjustments we need to make?" This reframe acknowledges their concern while shifting focus toward solutions. Effective reframing requires deep listening to understand how someone is currently viewing a situation, then offering alternative perspectives that honor their experience while expanding their options. The key is offering new frames as possibilities to consider, not as corrections to their wrong thinking. Anchoring is another sophisticated technique that involves establishing reference points that influence how people evaluate options and make decisions. If you want someone to consider a $50,000 investment, you might first mention a $100,000 option, making the $50K option seem more reasonable by comparison. But anchoring can be used ethically in many ways beyond pricing. You might anchor someone's expectations about timeline, effort required, or potential outcomes. If you expect a project to take 6 months, you might say, "Projects like this typically take anywhere from 8 to 12 months. Though we're optimistic we can complete this one in about 6 months." This sets the anchor high so that 6 months feels efficient rather than lengthy. Embedded commands involve placing suggestions within normal conversation in ways that bypass conscious resistance. Instead of saying directly, "You should buy this product," you might say, "When you decide to move forward with something like this, you'll want to make sure it has these 3 features." The embedded command, "Decide to move forward," suggests action without creating pressure. This technique must be used ethically and in service of the other person's genuine interests. The goal is not manipulation, but rather helping people overcome their own internal resistance to decisions that would benefit them. Future pacing involves helping people imagine positive outcomes so vividly that they become motivated to take the necessary actions. Instead of just describing features and benefits, you help them experience what success would feel like. You might say, imagine 6 months from now, when you've implemented this system, you walk into your office, and instead of feeling overwhelmed by chaos, you feel calm and in control because everything has its place, and you can find what you need instantly. How would that change your daily experience? This technique works because the brain has difficulty distinguishing between vividly imagined experiences and real memories. When someone imagines positive outcomes clearly, they begin to feel motivated, as if those outcomes were already partially real. Presuppositions involve structuring your language in ways that assume certain things are true, making it easier for people to accept your suggestions. Instead of asking, "Would you like to schedule a follow-up meeting?" you might say, "When would be the best time for our follow-up meeting?" This presupposes that there will be a follow-up meeting and focuses the discussion on timing rather than whether to meet at all. Conversational threading is the art of weaving multiple conversation topics together skillfully, picking up threads from earlier in the discussion and connecting them to current topics. This creates a sense of coherence and flow that makes conversations more engaging and memorable. For example, you might reference something someone mentioned at the beginning of a conversation when discussing solutions at the end. Remember when you mentioned that your main concern is efficiency? This approach directly addresses that by eliminating the 3 most time-consuming steps in your current process. Strategic vulnerability involves sharing appropriate personal information or admitting limitations in ways that build trust and encourage others to be more open. This might mean sharing a relevant struggle you faced, admitting when you don't know something, or acknowledging a mistake you made. The key is that the vulnerability must be genuine, relevant to the situation, and shared in service of the relationship rather than for manipulation or sympathy. When done well, strategic vulnerability creates psychological safety and deepens connection rapidly. Paradoxical thinking involves presenting ideas in ways that seem contradictory but actually reveal deeper truths. For example, you might say, "The fastest way to solve this problem might be to slow down and really understand what's causing it." Or, "The best way to gain control might be to let go of trying to control everything." This technique works because it engages people's curiosity and helps them see beyond surface-level solutions to more profound approaches. It also demonstrates sophisticated thinking that builds credibility. Temporal shifting involves helping people move mentally between past, present, and future timeframes to gain perspective and find solutions. You might ask someone to imagine how they'll view their current problem 5 years from now, or help them remember how they successfully handled similar challenges in the past. Different timeframes often reveal different insights and possibilities. Short-term thinking might focus on immediate solutions, while long-term thinking might reveal completely different priorities and strategies. Energy management is the art of consciously directing the emotional and mental energy in conversations. This involves recognizing when energy is building or flagging and making adjustments to maintain optimal engagement levels. You might increase energy through enthusiasm, humor, or inspiring vision casting. You might decrease energy through calmer voice tones, deeper breathing, or more reflective questions. The key is matching energy levels to what the conversation and the people involved need most. Advanced communicators also master conversational aikido, the ability to redirect aggressive or negative energy, rather than resisting it directly. If someone is argumentative, instead of arguing back, you might say, "You're clearly passionate about this. Help me understand what matters most to you so we can find a solution that addresses your concerns." This technique transforms opponents into allies by channeling their energy toward collaborative problem-solving rather than conflict. Finally, systemic thinking involves understanding how communication affects and is affected by larger systems, organizational culture, family dynamics, industry trends, or social contexts. Advanced communicators consider these broader influences and work with them rather than against them. They understand that changing communication patterns often requires addressing systemic issues, and that individual conversations can have ripple effects throughout entire systems when handled skillfully. These advanced techniques become most powerful when combined with the foundational skills we've covered: authentic presence, active listening, emotional intelligence, and genuine care for others' well-being. They're tools to serve connection and understanding, not weapons to manipulate or control. As you practice these techniques, remember that mastery comes through integration, not just accumulation. Focus on developing one or two advanced skills at a time until they become natural parts of your communication style. Then, gradually add others as your confidence and competence grow. The goal is not to become a communication magician who dazzles people with techniques, but to become someone whose presence and words consistently create positive transformation in the lives of others. When you achieve this level of mastery, communication becomes not just a skill you possess, but a gift you give to everyone you interact with. Chapter 11. Professional Communication Mastery. Professional communication is where all your skills come together under pressure. Your ability to communicate effectively in professional settings directly determines your career trajectory and ability to create meaningful impact. The foundation of professional excellence is understanding that every interaction serves two purposes: accomplishing tasks and building relationships. The most successful professionals master both simultaneously. They achieve concrete outcomes while making people feel valued and heard. Let's start with meetings, where much professional communication happens and careers are made or broken. When leading meetings, your role is creating conditions for collective thinking and decision-making. Establish psychological safety so people feel comfortable sharing ideas. Manage participation so all voices are heard, and guide the group toward clear outcomes. Start meetings by clarifying purpose and desired outcomes. Instead of diving into agenda items, remind everyone why you're gathered and what success looks like. This shared focus helps people prioritize contributions and stay on track. Ask specific people for input rather than opening the floor generally. Sarah, given your experience with similar projects, what challenges should we consider? Or, Mark, from a technical perspective, how feasible is this approach? This draws out different perspectives effectively. When participating in meetings led by others, focus on contributing value while building your professional reputation. Before speaking, consider whether your contribution moves the conversation forward or helps the group make better decisions. When you disagree, express concerns constructively. Instead of stating what won't work, propose alternatives. Instead of attacking ideas, ask questions that help people think through implications. What if we considered the impact on customer experience is more effective than that will never work? Presenting to senior executives requires a different style than peer discussions. Executives want bottom-line clarity, strategic perspective, and confident recommendations. Start with your conclusion, then provide supporting rationale. Follow this format: recommendation, key reasons, supporting data, implementation, approach, and resource requirements. Use confident language that demonstrates conviction while remaining open to feedback. Instead of, "I think this might work," try, "I recommend this approach because." This communicates appropriate confidence in your expertise. Email communication has become crucial for professional success. Yet many communicate poorly in writing. Email lacks emotional context, so your words must work harder to convey intent and maintain relationship quality. Structure emails for clarity and action. Use clear subject lines indicating topic and urgency. Start with context if needed, state your main point clearly, and end with specific next steps or requests. Pay attention to tone, which can be easily misinterpreted. What feels direct to you might seem abrupt to others. Adding phrases like, "Thanks for your patience as we work through this," can soften tone without sacrificing professionalism. Managing up, communicating effectively with supervisors is critical for both current effectiveness and career advancement. Your goal is making your supervisor's job easier while positioning yourself as a valuable contributor. Understand your supervisor's communication style and preferences. Some want detailed updates and frequent check-ins. Others prefer high-level summaries and minimal interruption. Unless problems arise, bring solutions, not just problems. When you identify issues, invest time thinking through potential approaches before escalating. Present problems with recommended solutions and reasoning. Performance reviews require balancing honesty, diplomacy, and strategic thinking. When giving feedback, use specific examples and focus on changeable behaviors rather than fixed personality traits. When receiving feedback, listen fully before responding and ask clarifying questions. Professional communication mastery means serving both task and relationship simultaneously. Every interaction should move work forward while strengthening your ability to work effectively with others. Chapter 12. Communication in personal relationships. Personal relationships require our most sophisticated communication skills because they involve the highest levels of emotional investment and vulnerability. Understanding how to communicate effectively with family, friends, and romantic partners can transform your entire life quality. The fundamental difference between professional and personal communication is the level of emotional investment involved. In personal relationships, you're not just exchanging information, you're sharing your deepest self with people who matter most. This creates both beautiful possibilities and significant challenges. Personal relationships require emotional attunement, the ability to sense and respond to loved ones' emotional states with sensitivity and care. This means understanding the unique ways different people express emotions, what comforts them when struggling, and how to celebrate when they're joyful. Every person has their own emotional language, specific ways they express love, stress, excitement, and disappointment. Learning these individual languages is crucial. What feels supportive to one person might feel overwhelming to another. Some people process difficult emotions by talking extensively, while others need quiet space before they're ready to discuss. Intimate communication requires managing your emotional triggers more skillfully than in any other context. The people closest to you can activate your deepest insecurities and strongest defensive reactions faster than anyone else. Learning to recognize when you've been triggered and pause before reacting is essential for healthy relationships. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions. It means creating space to respond from your wisest self rather than your wounded, defensive self. Conflict resolution in personal relationships is challenging because the stakes feel so high. Fear of relationship damage often leads people to avoid difficult conversations entirely or handle them in ways that attack the person rather than address the issue. Healthy relationship communication requires separating the issue from the person. You can strongly disagree with someone's behavior while still loving and respecting them. This distinction allows you to address problems directly without making the other person feel their worth is being questioned. Use I statements to express how behaviors affect you rather than making character judgments. Instead of, "You never listen to me," try, "When I'm sharing something important and you're looking at your phone, I feel unheard and disconnected." Listen for feelings and needs underneath your loved one's words, especially when they're expressing themselves in triggering ways. When someone says, "You care more about work than me," the underlying emotion might be, "I'm feeling disconnected and scared that I'm not a priority." Expressing appreciation and affection effectively requires understanding how different people prefer to receive love. Some feel most loved through words of affirmation, others through quality time, physical affection, acts of service, or thoughtful gifts. Pay attention to how your loved ones naturally express love to you, as this often indicates their preferences. Ask directly, "What are specific things I do that make you feel most cared for?" Difficult family dynamics require special strategies because relationships carry the weight of shared history and established patterns. Family members might relate to you as if you were the person you were years ago, and you might fall back into old communication patterns that no longer serve anyone. Setting boundaries with family requires particular sensitivity. You might say, "I love you and want to maintain our relationship. When conversations turn to criticizing my choices, I feel hurt and want to avoid talking. I'm going to change the subject when that happens, not to punish you, but to protect our relationship." Romantic relationships require the most sophisticated skills because they involve the highest intimacy, interdependence, and vulnerability. Partners need to coordinate daily logistics while maintaining emotional connection, managing individual growth within partnership, and navigating autonomy and togetherness. Successful romantic communication requires regular check-ins about both the relationship and each person's individual experience. Many couples only discuss their relationship when problems arise, creating a pattern where relationship conversations feel negative. Schedule regular times to appreciate each other and discuss how things are going. Include what's working well, what each person needs more or less of, and how you can continue growing together. Sexual communication is often the most challenging aspect because it involves vulnerability and insecurity. Yet sexual and relationship satisfaction are closely connected. Approach sexual communication with curiosity rather than judgment. Create safe spaces for honest conversation by responding to vulnerability with appreciation rather than criticism. Use positive language focusing on what you enjoy rather than criticizing what's not working. I love it when you creates more openness than you never. Ending relationships requires some of the most difficult communication many people face. Focus on your own experience rather than trying to convince the other person they should agree. This relationship isn't working for me anymore is more honest than this relationship is terrible. When possible, express gratitude for positive aspects while acknowledging the need to end things. I've learned so much from our time together, and I'll always be grateful. At the same time, I've realized we want different things. Personal relationship communication ultimately balances honesty with kindness, authenticity with sensitivity, and individual needs with collective well-being. The people closest to you deserve to know the real you while feeling loved and valued in your presence. Chapter 13. Public Speaking and Presentations. Public speaking transforms your communication skills into performance that can influence dozens, hundreds, or thousands of people simultaneously. Whether presenting to your team, speaking at conferences, or giving toasts, your ability to communicate effectively with groups impacts your opportunities and influence. The foundation of powerful public speaking is understanding that you're not just transmitting information, you're creating an experience for your audience. Every element should serve the goal of taking your audience from where they are now to where you want them to be. Most people approach presentations focusing on what they want to say rather than what the audience needs to hear. This speaker-centered approach results in technically accurate but emotionally flat presentations. Audience-centered presentations start with deep understanding of who you're speaking to and what would be valuable for them. Before writing your presentation, understand your audience's current situation, knowledge level, concerns, goals, and preferred communication style. Ask yourself, what does this audience care about most? What problems are they trying to solve? What would make them consider this presentation valuable? Your opening moments are critical because audiences decide quickly whether to pay attention or tune out. Don't waste time with boring logistics or generic pleasantries. Start with something that immediately captures attention and demonstrates you understand what matters to them. Open with a surprising statistic highlighting your topic's importance, a story illustrating the problem you're solving, a provocative question getting them thinking, or a bold statement challenging conventional thinking. Whatever approach you choose, connect it directly to your core message. Structure your presentation like a story with clear beginning, middle, and end. Your opening establishes context and importance. Your middle provides content, evidence, and insights. Your conclusion summarizes key points and motivates action. Use signposting to help your audience follow your logic. Tell them where you're going, guide them through each section, and remind them how pieces connect. Today, I'm sharing 3 strategies to increase customer retention. First, we'll examine why customers leave. Then, we'll explore proven retention approaches. Finally, we'll discuss implementation. Storytelling is perhaps your most powerful tool because stories bypass analytical resistance and connect with emotion and imagination. When you tell relevant stories well, your audience stops thinking about to-do lists. and starts experiencing your message viscerally. Use personal, specific stories directly relevant to your message. Structure stories with clear characters, conflict, and resolution. Help audiences understand who the story involves, what challenge they faced, what they did, and what resulted. The more vividly you help people imagine the situation, the more powerfully your message lands. Remember, you're not the hero of your presentation stories. Your audience is. Use stories to help them see themselves succeeding or achieving goals they care about. When people can envision themselves in your stories, they become motivated to take action. Managing presentation anxiety requires understanding that some nervousness is normal and can improve performance when channeled effectively. Don't aim to eliminate anxiety completely, but use that energy to enhance presence and audience connection. Practice your presentation enough that content becomes second nature, but don't over-rehearse to the point of sounding robotic. Know your material well enough to adapt if needed. Use breathing techniques to calm your nervous system. Deep, slow breathing activates your parasympathetic system, promoting calm and clear thinking. Practice box breathing. Inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding empty for 4. Reframe your relationship with the audience from adversarial to collaborative. Instead of seeing them as judges evaluating performance, see them as partners who want you to succeed. Most audiences root for speakers because everyone benefits when presentations are engaging. Visual aids should support your message, not replace it. Too many presenters create text-packed slides and read them word for word, which is boring and makes the speaker seem unnecessary. Your slides should enhance your verbal message, not duplicate it. Use visuals that clarify complex concepts, provide evidence, or create emotional impact. A powerful image, clear diagram, or compelling chart can communicate instantly what might take paragraphs to explain verbally. Keep slide text minimal and use large, readable fonts. If you include bullet points, limit them to 3 or 4 per slide as talking reminders rather than complete sentences for audiences to read. Handling questions and challenges requires preparation and poise. Anticipate likely questions and prepare thoughtful responses, but be comfortable saying, "I don't know," when asked about something outside your expertise. When someone asks hostile questions, resist becoming defensive. Thank them for the question. Reframe if necessary to focus on underlying concern and respond to legitimate interests rather than attacks. Virtual presentations require special consideration because technology creates communication barriers. You lose non-verbal cues that help read your audience, and they lose presence and energy from shared physical space. Compensate by being more intentional about engagement. Use polls, breakout rooms, chat functions, and direct questions more frequently than in person. Vary voice, tone, and pace to maintain auditory interest when visual connection is limited. Look directly into your camera rather than at your screen to create eye contact impression. Position your camera at eye level and ensure good lighting for professional appearance. Persuasive presentations require structuring logical arguments appealing to emotion and reason. Use credibility, emotional appeal, and logical argument. Establish credibility early by sharing relevant experience or results, qualifying you to speak on your topic. Appeal to emotions by helping your audience connect your topic to personal values and goals. Help them feel the pain of not acting and pleasure of achieving results. Support arguments with solid evidence, statistics, case studies, expert opinions, and research findings. Ensure evidence is relevant to your specific audience and situation. End with clear calls to action, telling your audience exactly what you want them to do next. Be specific about next steps rather than vague conclusions like, "This is important stuff." Public speaking mastery comes through practice, feedback, and continuous improvement. Seek presentation opportunities regularly through work projects, community organizations, or speaking clubs. Record yourself presenting and review honestly, noticing habits, pacing, energy, and message clarity. Remember that great speaking isn't about perfection, it's about connection. Focus on serving your audience rather than impressing them, sharing useful information rather than showing off expertise, and connecting human to human rather than performer to audience. Chapter 14. Digital Communication and Modern Challenges. The digital revolution has fundamentally changed how we communicate, creating new opportunities for connection while introducing unprecedented challenges. Understanding how to communicate effectively through digital channels while avoiding common pitfalls has become essential for personal and professional success. Digital communication strips away many contextual cues that make face-to-face communication rich and nuanced. You lose voice tone, body language, facial expressions, and immediate feedback, which means your words must work much harder to convey intended meaning. This reduction creates enormous potential for misunderstanding. Email has become the backbone of professional communication, yet most people communicate poorly through this medium. Email lacks the warmth and immediacy of face-to-face interaction, which can make even neutral messages feel cold or abrupt. Start emails with brief, personal acknowledgements when appropriate. "Hope you had a great weekend," or "Thanks for your quick response," helps maintain human connection in an otherwise transactional medium. Keep these warm-ups brief and genuine rather than formulaic. Structure emails for clarity and action. Use clear subject lines indicating topic and urgency level. If asking for something specific, make that request clear and include necessary deadlines or context. If providing information, organize it logically and highlight key points requiring attention. Be especially careful with tone in written communication. What feels direct and efficient to you might come across as harsh or dismissive to others. Read emails from the recipient's perspective before sending. Would this message feel respectful and professional if you received it? When dealing with complex or emotionally sensitive topics, consider whether email is appropriate. Some conversations require real-time dialogue richness to prevent misunderstandings and maintain relationship quality. Text messaging has created informal communication that blends personal and professional interaction. The casual nature can create confusion about appropriate boundaries, response timing expectations, and communication style. Understand your workplace and personal communication culture regarding text messaging. Some organizations expect immediate responses, while others treat texts as non-urgent. Some people appreciate casual texting for work coordination, while others prefer keeping text messaging purely personal. Be mindful of timing when sending text messages. Late night or early morning messages might be intrusive, even if you don't expect immediate responses. Use scheduled sending features when possible to respect others' boundaries. Social media communication presents unique challenges because it blends public and private communication in ways that can create complications. Comments, posts, and reactions that seem casual can be seen by large audiences and preserved permanently. Before posting anything, consider who might see it and how it could be interpreted out of context. Digital communication lacks the nuance and forgiveness of face-to-face interaction. Jokes that would be funny in person might be misunderstood online. Casual comments might be taken more seriously than intended. Video conferencing has become essential for remote work and virtual relationships, but creates its own communication challenges. Slight delays can disrupt natural conversational flow, making it harder to read cues and coordinate speaking turns. Compensate by being more intentional about turn-taking and non-verbal communication. Use clear verbal cues like, "I'd like to build on what Sarah said," or "Let me pause here for reactions," to manage conversation flow. Pay extra attention to non-verbal communication on video calls. Your facial expressions and gestures are more visible and important when they're the primary visual information available. Ensure your camera is positioned well and your environment is professional. Online conflict resolution requires special care because digital mediums can escalate conflicts quickly. Without face-to-face context, people often assume negative intent more readily and respond more harshly than they would in person. When conflicts arise digitally, move to richer communication channels quickly. If an email exchange becomes tense, suggest a phone call or video meeting. If text messages become heated, pick up the phone. Use extra empathy and assumption of positive intent in digital conflicts. Remember that others might be communicating under stress, might have misunderstood your message, or might be dealing with technical frustrations affecting their communication style. Digital boundaries have become essential for mental health and relationship quality. The always-on nature of digital communication can create stress and prevent the downtime necessary for reflection and renewal. Establish clear boundaries around when and how you'll respond to different digital communications. Let people know your typical response times for email, text messages, and social media. This prevents others from assuming delayed responses indicate disinterest or disrespect. Create technology-free spaces in your personal life where you can focus fully on face-to-face relationships and activities. Many people find that constant digital communication interferes with their ability to be fully present with the people and experiences that matter most. Information overload is a constant challenge in digital environments. The volume of messages, notifications, and updates can overwhelm your ability to process information thoughtfully and respond appropriately. Develop systems for managing digital information flow. This might include using filters and folders for email, setting specific times for checking social media, or using notification settings that alert you only to truly urgent communications. Practice digital minimalism by choosing quality over quantity in online interactions. Instead of trying to maintain superficial contact with hundreds of people through social media, invest more deeply in meaningful digital relationships with fewer people. Online presentation and personal branding through digital communication has become important for professional development. How you communicate online contributes to others' perceptions of your expertise, professionalism, and character. Be intentional about the digital impression you create through communication style, response timing, and content sharing. Share valuable insights and resources that demonstrate your expertise and values. Engage thoughtfully with others' content rather than just broadcasting your own messages. Maintain consistency between online and offline communication style. People who interact with you in person should recognize the same person in your digital communications. Dramatic differences between online and offline personality can damage trust and authenticity. Digital communication with different generations requires sensitivity to varying comfort levels and preferences with technology. Older colleagues might prefer email or phone calls over text messaging. Younger people might find formal email style unnecessarily stiff. Adapt your digital communication style to match others' preferences while staying true to your authentic voice. This might mean being more formal with some contacts and more casual with others, or using different platforms for different relationships. Privacy and security considerations have become crucial aspects of digital communication. Understanding how to protect sensitive information while maintaining open communication requires ongoing attention and education. Be cautious about sharing confidential information through digital channels that might not be secure. When in doubt, choose more secure communication methods or have sensitive conversations face-to-face. The future of digital communication will continue evolving rapidly. The key to success is maintaining focus on fundamental communication principles: respect, clarity, empathy, and authenticity, while adapting to new tools and formats. Remember that digital communication is a tool for human connection, not a replacement for it. The most effective digital communicators use technology to enhance and supplement face-to-face relationships rather than substituting for genuine human contact. Chapter 15: Putting it all together and next steps. After this comprehensive journey through communication skills, you now possess a toolkit that can transform every relationship and interaction in your life. But knowledge alone isn't enough. Real transformation happens when you consistently apply these skills until they become natural parts of who you are. Don't feel overwhelmed by trying to master everything at once. Choose one or two areas that resonate most strongly, or address your most pressing communication challenges. Focus intensively on developing those skills until they become habitual. Then gradually add others. Start with foundation skills that support everything else. If you're not yet skilled at active listening, that's your starting point. Without the ability to truly hear and understand others, all other communication techniques will have limited impact. If you struggle with self-awareness or emotional regulation, invest time developing those capabilities before moving to advanced techniques. Consider your current life situation when choosing which skills to prioritize. If you're dealing with ongoing relationship conflicts, focus on difficult conversation skills and empathy development. If you're trying to advance professionally, emphasize workplace communication and presentation skills. If you're struggling with confidence, work on self-awareness and authentic expression. Practice these skills in low-stakes situations before applying them in high-pressure moments. Use casual conversations with friends to experiment with active listening techniques. Practice reading non-verbal cues during everyday interactions. Try influence approaches in situations where the outcome doesn't matter significantly. This gradual approach builds confidence and competence systematically, rather than putting you in situations where failure could damage important relationships or opportunities. Seek feedback actively from trusted people in your life. Ask friends, family, or colleagues about your communication strengths and areas for improvement. Most people are hesitant to give honest feedback unless specifically asked. But they often have valuable insights that can accelerate your development. When asking for feedback, be specific. Instead of, "How do I communicate?" try questions like, "When I'm explaining complex ideas, do I give you enough context? Or do I assume too much background knowledge?" Or, "When we have disagreements, do I seem open to your perspective? Or do I come across as defensive?" Create opportunities to observe excellent communicators in action. Pay attention to people who seem to effortlessly connect with others, who handle difficult conversations with grace, or who influence others without creating resistance. Notice what they do differently from average communicators. Remember that effective communication styles vary based on personality, context, and relationship dynamics. Don't try to copy someone else's style. Exactly. Identify principles and techniques you can adapt to your own authentic communication approach. Join groups that provide regular opportunities to practice communication skills. This might include professional associations, community organizations, speaking clubs, or volunteer groups. The more you practice these skills in diverse settings with different people, the more natural and effective they become. Track your progress by keeping a communication journal where you reflect on interactions that went well and those that could have been better. Note what techniques you tried, how others responded, and what you learned from each experience. Pay attention to patterns in your communication successes and challenges. Do you consistently struggle with certain types of people or situations? Do particular emotions trigger communication problems? Are there specific skills that seem to have the biggest positive impact when you use them effectively? Use pattern recognition to target your development efforts more precisely. If you consistently struggle with authority figures, focus on managing up skills and confidence-building techniques. If family interactions trigger your worst communication habits, prioritize emotional regulation and boundary-setting skills. Remember that communication skills are like physical fitness. They require ongoing maintenance and development. You can't master these skills once and ignore them. Regular practice and continued learning are essential for maintaining and improving your communication effectiveness over time. As you develop these skills, you'll likely notice that your relationships deepen, your professional opportunities increase, and your ability to influence positive change grows significantly. But perhaps most importantly, you'll develop greater confidence in your ability to connect with others and navigate challenging situations. This confidence creates a positive spiral. As you become more skilled at communication, you approach interactions with greater optimism and less anxiety. This improved emotional state makes you even more effective, which builds further confidence and skill. The ultimate goal of communication mastery isn't to become perfect or to manipulate others for your benefit. It's to become someone who consistently adds value to every interaction, who helps others feel heard and understood, and who creates positive change through authentic human connection. When you achieve this level of communication effectiveness, you become a catalyst for better relationships, more effective teamwork, stronger communities, and positive change in whatever context you find yourself. Your communication skills become a gift you give to everyone you interact with. As you continue developing these skills, remember that the most powerful communication always serves something larger than yourself. When you use these abilities to help others succeed, to solve important problems, to build stronger relationships, and to create positive change in your community, you're fulfilling the highest purpose of human communication. Your journey in communication mastery has just begun. The skills you've learned today will serve you for the rest of your life, but they'll also continue evolving as you gain experience and face new challenges. Stay curious, stay committed to growth, and stay focused on using these skills to make a positive difference in the world. The world needs people who can communicate with wisdom, empathy, and effectiveness. By developing these skills consistently, you're not just improving your own life, you're contributing to better relationships, more effective organizations, and stronger communities everywhere you go. Your voice matters. Your ability to connect with others matters. Your commitment to communication excellence matters. Use these skills well, and watch as your life and the lives of those around you transform in beautiful and meaningful ways. The conversation continues now with every person you meet and every interaction you have. Make them count.